I've hit that moment again where my iPhone's out of storage and it stopped working. I tried moving data off it, but it didn't work. I thought about getting a new phone, but that's expensive. So then it clicked. This is my 5th iPhone in 9 years. So instead of just buying another one, I'm switching to Samsung to see whether Apple is serving me or whether I've just been loyal out of habit. So just to give you a little bit of context, I got my first phone when I was 11. It was an Android. Because to my parents, it was just a way to contact me, which, to be fair, is literally what a phone is for. But I was a teenager, and at the time that meant thinking that Androids were not cool. What I really loved was my iPod Touch.
The iPod Touch has been a remarkable product for us. And a lot of people call it an iPhone without the phone.
After a lot of begging and after the sale of my iPod, I got my first iPhone when I was 13 because it was the cooler phone. And I didn't know any better. But once I left school, my relationship with my phone changed. It stopped being about status and started being about function. It became how I navigated cities, managed work, paid for things, found information, stayed connected. But fast forward 9 years, I'm nearly £6,000 deep into Apple products. And now a phone stops feeling like a fun upgrade. So before comparing brands, I want to strip this right back and ask the basic question: what is a phone meant to do? Let's get that Oxford Dictionary out. A telephone is a system of transmitting sound to a distance by wire or cord or radio. So phones used to be about calls, that was it. It was a telecom product. So how did Apple end up on top? It's because Steve Jobs framed the phone as something bigger, not a telecom handset, a platform. At the iPhone launch in 2007, Steve Jobs said,
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone.
Steve Jobs wasn't just selling specifications, he was selling what the iPhone unlocked. And that shift in framing is the reason why Apple didn't just capture users, it shaped the entire phone market. The phone became a pocket computer for messaging, internet, apps, camera, navigation, music, basically infrastructure for daily life. But if Apple are the market leaders, then why am I ditching them? 3 reasons. First one is cost. Over 9 years, I've literally spent over £6,000, and that's literally about £417 a year on the phone alone. Plus, last year I literally spent £108 on iCloud. And I suppose this does make sense because Apple does position itself as a luxury product in the phone market. But over time, getting a new phone has stopped feeling like an upgrade and it's felt more like a financial obligation. Also, just to add on to that, 4 years ago I literally lost my iPhone 12 Pro in a club, and as it was uninsured, I literally still had to pay the £850 contract for another 2 years on top of the replacement phone which I got. And then that's when my phone stopped feeling like an asset and started feeling like a liability. The second issue is the design contradiction, which I just can't ignore. Apple keeps on improving camera quality, which is great, but better cameras create large data files. And I don't know about you, but the biggest data storage point on my iCloud is my photos. I think I have about 250 gigabyte of photos alone. Considering Apple positions itself as premium hardware at high prices, basic functionality shouldn't degrade the phone just because you're using the device normally. And to be clear, Apple isn't the only one doing this. Like Samsung and others also upsell cloud and storage options, but the difference is the price. So I also did a bit of digging into this, and between my first phone, the 5C, and the 13 Pro, the camera improved by roughly 5 to 9 times, whereas the storage capacity that Apple was offering only improved by 7 times. And that gap matters. The phone creates more data every year, but literally limits where that data can live. So we as a consumer have to pay the mismatch, whether it's in time, deleting old memories, or whether it's paying for a cloud subscription. Apple has started to address this, to be fair. With their new iPhone 17, they're starting the storage models at 256 gigabyte. But for years, that trade-off has been consistent. The device generates a problem and the solution is the subscription. And at Apple's price point, that trade-off feels harder to justify. A premium phone shouldn't quietly punish normal use. So that's where it stopped working for me. And the third reason is Apple's ecosystem dependence. We all know this, but Apple works best when everything you own is Apple. I bought into that and got myself a Apple computer, a MacBook, to match my iPhone. And whilst my iOS experience was better, I still loved using Windows. Thanks, Bill Gates. So file transfers, app compatibility, data backups were harder than they needed to be. So I did a bit of digging into this, whether or not this is just my personal frustration or whether or not other people feel this. When I read Apple's 2025 annual report, my experience does line up with what the regulators are investigating Apple for in the EU and the US, about how Apple controls app distribution, potentially might be monopolizing the market, and controls data access. And whilst I'm not judging any of these cases, I do just find it interesting, and it made me realise that I don't want an iPhone if it means I'm constantly going to have to work against the setup I'm most comfortable with, which for me is Windows. Okay, so enough opinions. I want to actually test this properly. So my biggest pain points are how much Apple costs, the storage, and independence from a closed ecosystem. I don't really care about aesthetics, the luxury feel, or how smooth the user interface is. I just care about one thing: does the phone actually function for my needs? So I've had my SIM card in this phone for the last 30 days. So I judged both phones on the things that I rely on daily, which are contacting people, using the internet, paying for things, waking up in the morning, music and audio, navigating and using maps, taking photos and videos, accessing apps and softwares, and the main one, having storage and accessing my data. So after a month of using this phone and my SIM card being in here with no returns, both phones are pretty solid and they all do the basics well. So with calling, using the internet and paying, there's not really any difference. The only thing worth mentioning is Apple has FaceTime and Samsung doesn't. So instead I just switched to WhatsApp calling when I need to face call someone. But that's basically it. But where things start to differ is in the small quality of life stuff. Waking up feels way better on a Samsung because I can connect my alarm sounds to Spotify. Also, audio is way simpler because I have a headphone jack. So these are both small differences, but they obviously still affect my day-to-day. But navigation and productivity felt better on a Samsung. This is because navigation, so using Google Maps and stuff, so the Android equivalent of Apple CarPlay is Android Auto, and when I use Android Auto in the car, it just works way better. It glitches out way less. I can actually use the touchscreen in my car on Apple CarPlay. I couldn't do that at all. My calendar integrated way more cleanly with the rest of my devices, so obviously I use Outlook a lot. So now I can access all of my calendars from any device sort of thing, whereas before it was just an iCloud calendar and I couldn't really see that anywhere else other than my phone. So obviously I'm comparing the camera quality on my iPhone 13 Pro and the Samsung A52. So camera wise, obviously Apple's is better, it's not up for debate. But the main differences are obviously the storage and the cost. As I mentioned earlier, my Apple consumption has totaled around £6,000. So this is accumulated over 9 years. For Apple, my phone usage has averaged about £417 a year. So storage wise, last year I paid £108 for iCloud subscription. I know, whereas I bought my Samsung for 50 quid. Obviously, I understand that's secondhand and it's probably a £200 phone, but still, that's a lot. That's a big difference, babe. Literally could have bought a flight to Paris for that. And the storage is covered by I've got 128 gig. Obviously, because the phone's new, like I've had way less friction with that. And also cloud storage is covered by OneDrive. So my mum pays £90 for a OneDrive family storage plan. So I even have a micro SD card for my internal storage. On Samsung, the storage just feels way less fragile. So on every iPhone I've ever owned, once my storage has hit a limit, messages stop sending, apps won't update, banking apps stop updating, and that's not inconvenience, that's failure. And the real shift is I'm thinking about my phone way less. So looking at everything together, the differences outside of looks aren't dramatic. This video isn't about Apple being bad or Samsung being perfect. Most core features worked well on both phones and the apps I use were still available. Apple looks great and works brilliantly inside its ecosystem, but outside of that, I often found myself managing the phone more than actually using it. After 30 days of Samsung, things feel simpler, and for me that matters a lot more than how nice the phone looks and how nice the photos are. Will I keep my SIM in this phone? Yeah, for now. I don't know if it's a forever decision, but I'll check back in a year's time to see how this really holds up. So yeah, let me know in the comments, what's the thing that usually kills your phone? Is it storage, the battery, the screen? Thanks for watching, see you next week.